Hey guys, Ray from Love RV and now Boat. So in this video I'm going to open up some panels and give you a look at the kind of the nuts and bolts of our CHB 34-foot trawler named Vestri. In the last video, Ann gave you a complete walkthrough of the living quarters and above deck and all that sort of thing. So I'm back now with my tour, kind of more of the systems, engine, plumbing, electrical, that sort of thing. So let's get to it. Let's start with the propane system and the appliances. So we do have a fridge. It doesn't run on propane like an RV fridge can, but it does run on 12-volt battery power and 110. So you can use it onshore or 12-volt offshore. And it does actually not use too much power. It must be really well insulated. And it's very big and deep. I find I can actually put probably more food in this than the RV fridge that I have, the Dometic. This has a tiny little freezer, but I'm going to carry a portable freezer up on the top deck, another 12-volt freezer, so we should have plenty of stuff for our cold food storage areas. Then for cooking, there's no microwave, which is fine. We might not get a microwave because it takes up space and we have limited counter space as it is. I do carry an Instapot, so I use that quite often. And then I love cooking up with gas. Spending 12 years full-time in the RV, I'm quite comfortable with cooking with gas. So it does have an old Wedgwood stove. Actually, these burners work pretty good. Kind of a really old school stove. Everything's very well built. Might be able to clean it up, make it really functional. Right now it's all working, but might be able to improve it, make it look better. If not, it might be on the upgrade list to put a new stove in here. And it does have an oven as well. I've tried it, seemed to cook quite well. So that gas comes from two tanks, 20-pound tanks, and they're located out of the boat up on the fly bridge, so I guess technically they're outside the boat. They're in a locker up there, and that locker is actually vented at the bottom with holes, so if there was a leak up there, it would flow out and out away into the breeze. So it's pretty safe as far as that goes. Also, they've added a special solenoid, and there's a switch breaker over there that we turn on when we want to use gas, and then we turn it off when we're not using it or we're sleeping, so that solenoid turns off the gas up top. And of course you can always go manually turn them off. Anyway, it's been kind of updated. The lines were updated because not too long ago the previous owner had installed this Dickinson propane heater, which is kind of nice. This is a Canadian company, I believe. They make really nice stuff. Everything's nice stainless steel. So you go in there and you light the little flame in there, and there's some knobs and a fan. I've tested it. That's about all. I haven't had to use it or anything because it's been summertime. And then it's a totally vented heat, so it goes up, and there's a small chimney stack on top, so all the air goes up there. And in here there's no CO or anything like that to be worried about. Although I have put in, there is a carbon monoxide detector that was put in right there. So this was professionally done. They've installed the piping, so there's some kind of a rubber hose that comes out of there and runs somewhere through the back behind this. I haven't actually taken everything apart to look at it, but it pops out here, I guess, after connecting to the stove, and then the piping goes up, and then it goes up into the flybridge compartment. And then also for safety, there's a propane detector down there. You can see the red one. There may be another one in the engine room, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look for that. You can see there's the propane fume detector. So I can see there's 3 lights there. So I'm not sure if I can add a second detector. I'd kind of like to add it, have one in the living area, but also one down in the bilge. So if ever we do get propane going down there, we would be alerted about that. Then you got your kitchen sink. And that just goes straight out. You can see there's kind of a hose there. Yes, it's just got some tape over the hose clamp. and it goes straight out and then goes overboard. Again, it comes out right about the water line. So another thing we have on the bridge is a nice Dickinson barbecue. Seems to be functional. Tested it out a couple times. And then another 20-pound propane tank to feed that. Aft cabin plumbing. So we got a sink here, hot and cold water, shower, hot and cold water. So they come, there's some piping in there that comes from in the engine room to both of those supply lines. And then we also have a drain here, and that drain goes into the engine room and then along, and then it goes out of a through hole hole and goes to the ocean. The toilet, this is a manual pump toilet, Jabsco, seems to be a very popular brand for boats, and it's just a pump style toilet. So you got a couple things here, you can unlock it there. I think when it's in lock position it helps to block any seawater from coming in, because this uses raw seawater from the ocean. It draws it into the ocean, and then you pump it in. You can see go to one side and you pump into the toilet. Get a look here. Draws water from the ocean. Get her in there, do your business, whatever. And then the other side like that, you flick over there and it just empties the water, and the stuff goes out to the ocean. So we mainly just use this one for going pee in. We have a holding tank for our black stuff, the nasty number 2, but it's kind of handy to have. I'll show you how the hoses are plumbed here. This has got some access points. There's an access point here, because I have to get at the valves if I want to, like there's holes to the ocean, right? So if I want to turn off those valves to block the ocean from coming into the boat, say there's a problem with the plumbing or I'm going to be away from the boat for an extended period, there's 2 holes here, I can reach those. But also I can take off this panel if I really want to get in there. So we'll just go in there and you can see them there. That one down there is the one that draws the water in to the toilet, and then this thicker one puts the water out, nasty water out. And you can see the big valves on them. They call these seacocks or through hull valves. Anyway, they're very important to keep in good shape and to monitor in case water starts to leak in. If it leaks in too much, you'll sink your boat. So very important things, and to have access for them, and also to make sure they work. A lot of times in these boats, people will leave the valves open so long that they seize, and then when you really want to use them, you're not able to. So I've been working at making sure all the valves are in good shape and I'm able to use them. And then there's another line coming here. You can see it goes out as well above the water line there, and it's just coming from the deck, one of the drains on the deck for any water that gets onto the boat's deck gets drained through that. Also in the bathroom here we have a 110 volt plug, and they're GFCI plugs for safety. You can see the light on there. And then up here we have just a 12 volt light. Nice mirror. And then down there these boards can be lifted away. So if you're going to have a shower in here, the water would just fall into here and it'd end up in the actual bilge. There's a drain down here. It would drain down into there and end up in the main bilge there and get pumped overboard eventually. So because we don't use this one for a shower, I've actually gone down in this one and put a water warning device. So if there's going to be water in here, it probably means that I have a bad leak from those seacocks, so I decided to just put a warning thing there. And here's the forward cabin bathroom. It's much the same. So this is the one we shower in, and a little bit smaller, but it's also going to be the one we do our number 2s in, because this one actually goes off into a holding tank. It's been modified. They have access there to reach a seacock, but not much access other than you can lift this up. You can reach down in there and you can get at the plumbing and the seacocks as well. But what this one does differently, it draws ocean water in for its rinse water, but the output water is going through this wall, and behind in the engine room there's I think a 25-gallon holding tank. So it gets manually pumped into that, and then it has a macerator pump on it. So either I can, at sea, a certain amount of miles offshore, you're allowed to empty your holding tanks into the ocean, and there's a seacock down here to open. Then I hit the macerator pump and it pumps it out. Or there's a pipe that goes up to the deck, and in marinas you can get a vacuum flush, like they vacuum your tank out with a holding tank thing. We haven't done that yet. I have tested the macerator and it works pretty good. But Anne hates this toilet, mainly because it's been installed like this, and it's kind of meant to pump down and out. But in this application, it's being pumped up through a line and kind of up into a holding tank and down. So it takes quite a bit of pumping sometimes to get your waste to get out of the toilet and then out. And you know, she's not that strong of arms. She doesn't have a very good back. You got to bend over and you're pumping up and down and pumping up and down, sometimes 20, 30 times to get the thing to go. So she's decided, get an electric toilet installed. So that's going to be one of the first things on the list very shortly. It's actually being sent. I think it arrives today, and I'm going to install an electric toilet, and it will actually have its own macerator. So the waste will be macerated and then pumped into the holding tank, and then when I pump it out to sea, it'll actually get macerated a second time. So that'll be nice. Anyway, you can look for that video soon, the big toilet change. Next, we'll show you what's at the very front of the boat. So I peeled off a few covers here, and right under the V-berth, the big opening down here, nothing in it right now, but you can see down here, that's for my bow thruster. We have the side shift bow thruster that mounts outside. You can see the flashing there is the controller box, so the wireless stuff talks to that. And it activates this big switch here. You can see these big cables coming from the batteries, supplying the power to it, and then this thing just turns it on and switches the polarity back and forth, whether you want to go left or right. You can see the white wires coming out of it, and they go out the front of the boat, right out the bow, and through the hull above the water line, and into that bow thruster to power it. Seems to be a fairly large crack there. That's on the inside of the boat. I don't know what happened there over the years. But anyway, this is a nice big compartment. I don't have much in there. Sometimes we could use it for life jackets or soft stuff, because I just don't want anything to, when the boat's rocking, to come and hit and damage that stuff there. So I may end up putting a board across it to protect it, and then we can better utilize that area. And then above that is our anchor locker. You can see in there it has 2 doors. Sometimes when the chain is coming in and the rope, I have to come in here and kind of move it aside. Sometimes it will pile up and then it doesn't want to come in. The windlass can't draw it in, so I'll come in here and just give a yard pull down on it and kind of move the chain around. Anyway, there's 50 feet of chain and I believe about 250 feet of rope. And you can see where it's tied there. That's the very end of the rope. They call it the bitter end. So we can put up to 300 feet of anchor line out there. Up in this corner beside the anchor locker is the control for the windlass. It's a Maxell windlass. So that allows me to use kind of a wired remote to lower and raise the anchor. And see where the power is supplied through there. There's a 100 amp breaker in the electrical room. Here's our anchor. It's a Lumar 44 pound. Seems to be a good anchor. We've anchored a number of times, hasn't been a problem. And a Maxwell windlass right here, and then I have a remote control for it, or you can hook up a manual thing in case your electric stops working. Next, let's get behind the scenes of the electrical. This is sort of my forte, being an electronic technician for many years, repairing stuff. I was kind of happy when I looked at this boat and the DC panel had been changed from the original. So I think this is part of the original down here, and it's kind of really old switches, but it's been updated at some point. It's all Blue Sea stuff. And there's a Blue Sea meter there. Give you amperage and voltage. You get all the switches, they're all marked. All nice on-off switches there. And then the light lights up when they're on. So we've got running lights, anchor light. There's a spare there that's not hooked up to anything. Engine room lights, refrigerator. When you're off grid, you run your refrigerator on the DC. It's got all your cabin lights, bow thrusters. I guess the controller for the bow thruster is hooked to the forward cabin lights. Power. 12 volt outlets, your water pressure for your water pump. And then this one accessory is propane. So that turns off a solenoid up on the fly bridge where the propane tanks are located. And there's a solenoid there that turns a valve on and off. So down here, you normally leave that off so that the propane lines down here, if there's any leak, it can't leak from the tanks. It can only leak whatever's in the lines. And then when you want to use propane, you turn that on, switches a solenoid, and your propane turns on. It's kind of cool. Electronics, you know, your depth sounder and your radar and your chart plotters, that sort of thing. Over here we have that macerator pump, and when you turn that on and off, you also get a level indicator. Turn that on and off, you can see down there there's a level indicator for the holding tank. And it works kind of like the RV dummy lights. I think I'd like to change that to a sea level system. Autopilot, and then we got bilge pump 1 and bilge pump 2. They stay on, and down here for the 2 bilge pumps, like one bilge pump is kind of your freshwater bilge, stuff that comes out of the showers or anything that kind of leaks into the boat from the lines or anything ends up in that bilge. Then there's another bilge that's the engine bilge. It usually remains dry, but if there ever is any leaks from the engine, the raw seawater stuff, that bilge is there as well. So there's 2 bilges. And then the macerator pump switch, you hold, that's when you're emptying that tank, you just hold it down. Here we have a 1-2 combined or off DC switch. So you get your starter batteries, there's 2 AGM, and then the house batteries are 4 golf cart 6 volt batteries. So you can switch either, you can start the boat with the starter or the house. Not really a fan of this arrangement, so they'll probably be changing that strictly because it's got some pretty long wire runs that are unfused as far as I can tell. Up here we've got engine instruments, gauges, that sort of thing. Your horn, wipers, and the windlass, which is your anchor, power anchor up and down. So that's that system. We'll go down and show you the AC panel down here for your shore power. That's behind this little thing. So this part here is missing because I've taken the inverter that was in here out already because it wasn't functioning properly. It's going to be changed with a brand new inverter. This thing is kind of a mystery to me, and it's kind of a mystery to the previous owner. I think it's something kind of an anti-corrosion system that's not really hooked up. Maybe I'll be exploring it when I it's kind of down on my list, but I'd like to see what's going on there with those gauges. This used to have a thing here. This boat used to have a diesel heater before they updated to a propane heater. So that's missing there. So you've got your, out of your inverter, it powers the outlets and your refrigerator. And then there's actually a spare that's not hooked up to anything. And then down here, we have your shore power 30 amp. And then that switches to your inverter on shore power as far as the charger and stuff like that. Another spare, and then the water heater. So it's pretty nice setup. It looks wired nice. Like I say, that was one thing that I was encouraged. I didn't want to be rewiring an entire boat. Too much of a job. We wanted to get out and start using it and then pick away at upgrades. So here's the main wiring closet. And it's kind of nice access. You can see right in there. And there's a door that actually comes off very easy. It just lifts off. It's one thing I like about this boat. The doors are really good, but the hinges are all of such that you can just lift off the door and then put it back very easily and get at stuff. There's a door here that opens. Has actually a light up above there to look at everything in there. So I'm still have to go through that, but we got, you know, DC bus bars, negative and positive for all the different circuits. This is where that main switch is here, and you can see it comes from to starter motor, I guess there. So yeah, you got start battery, house battery, and you can choose which one, and then they feed off this line, and it goes to all your distribution, all the switches and breakers up there. But like I said, I don't think either of these wires are actually fused. Usually you don't fuse your starter because it draws so much power when it's starting. You know, in cars and boats, a lot of times the starter line is not fused. But I actually don't think that this house bank is fused. I saw a fuse for the inverter, but I never saw a fuse actually on the bank itself. So if there's any issue along that a very long run of wire, it could melt down and cause a fire. So I'm going to be rearranging some of that and adding some protection. Up here we have some add-ons that were put in. I can see VHF, depth sounder, chart plotter, radar, fly bridge, something display, HS switch. And down here we have a breaker. It's a 100 amp. I believe that's for the windlass. Anchor up and down motor. Like I said, I haven't totally explored anything. I didn't want to get too much into messing around with this stuff because we had to get the boat back up here. So I kind of left it as be. I didn't want to introduce any faults before I really went through and figured everything out. Down here we have a shunt, so imagine that's for that display that I showed you up front. There's a couple other red wires here. They're actually the throttle and the transmission gear shifters. They're cable drive. They go all the way down to the transmission and the engine. Then we got some huge chains. So that's your, when you turn the big ship's wheel, turns a chain. And then there's another one for the bridge that goes way up there. Then those go down and they change a big pipe here that goes way to the back, and it actually ends up at your tiller at the back. As far as AC goes, the AC comes in up there somewhere. Looks like way up there. It's coming in. Actually, I think it's right there. So that's going to be a job too, because I'm going to change the plug receptacle there. It's got those twist lock, standard Marnico, I think it's called, twist lock. I'm going to put a smart plug in, so it's a little safer in my opinion. And I'm also going to put in a surge protector from ActiveStart. Give you a view of the AC breakers here. So very easy to access. Everything's right there. That's what I like. We have to crawl around underneath something. It's a nice closet to work in. And then we'll just go down below. This is where they had the inverter installed. Down here. You can see there's a switch to turn it on and off. And some big cables. They're 2-watt cables that come through from the engine compartment. and they had it mounted on the wall here. Now I've taken it off. It was a Xantrex 2000 watt inverter, and also had a charger and a transfer switch, so it was all in one. I've just kind of bypassed it for now because we've ordered a brand new. So I decided to go with the same brand. This inverter charger was 13 years old, and also was only a modified sine wave. So we have, you know, computers and things and chargers, so we want a pure sine wave for our sensitive electronics. So I'm going to install their up-to-date. I think it runs about $2,000, but it's an inverter charger, 2000 watt, and it also has Bluetooth, and it's also compatible with what they call NEMA, which is kind of a protocol where marine equipment can talk to each other. So if we ever update a chart plotter that has the same, we'll be able to look at information about the inverter on that. Just ties all the boat communications together. So that's going to be a cool upgrade. But I'll be able to put in the incoming power to it and the outgoing power, and then I'll have a transfer switch, so it'll have, I think, a 100 amp battery charger in it. Should be nice. Anyway, look for that upgrade in the near future as well. I'm going to do all the electrical, smart plug, and a surge protector, soft starter unit, and then the inverter, and we'll have a really nice electrical system. But I like this. There's lots of room to work down here. Same thing, the doors are easy to pop off. I can open all this up in basically 30 seconds. I can have access to all this. And then even these stairs can lift up and come out of the way, so I have great access to everything. And they've wired in plugs all over the boat. There's one there, and there's the numerous plugs around the boat that come off the inverter. So I don't really have a whole lot to update. At this time, I think I'm just going to leave their lead acid house batteries the way they are in the AGM, and I'm going to use a power box. I have my EcoFlow power box for running stuff as well as extra charging, and then probably only about 2 months of boating. So next year when we come back, I'll be updating this to a lithium house bank, and then I'll have to put a DC to DC charger, different things like that. It's a little more involved when you upgrade lithium on a boat. Anyway, let's get down in that engine compartment, let you have a look at that. So here we go. Floor has all been opened up. I got all the hatches up. They're pretty thick, and then they're insulated below just to stop all the engine noise from coming up here. So there's kind of a big one there. That's kind of the main access I use a lot of the times. There's a big battery bank there. Then when I want to get to the engine, there's 2 hatches you take off over there, and then a big hatch that you take off there, and then you pop the table off, and then you have full access everywhere. Let me get you a closer look at the engine. This is a Ford Lehman diesel engine, 120 horsepower, 6-cylinder. I'm still learning everything myself, all the systems and that, so in a future video I'll probably give you a total engine tour. But anyway, I felt it was in pretty good shape. As far as the history goes, I think it was rebuilt in 2008, and doesn't have a huge amount of hours on the rebuild. They were kind of sketchy of the total hours because at some point the hour meter had stopped working. Right now our hour meter says 700 and something hours on it. But then once you have the hour meter working, then you can figure out all your oil change intervals and stuff like that. Got a few different things in here that I have to work on. There's the major oil change, which is pretty easy. There's actually an attachment on here with a pump, so it's attached to the bottom of the engine so I can drain the old oil out and then just fill the new oil. But this one's also a little different, is the injection pump here has its own oil as well and requires its own oil change. Back here you can see the fuel filters and oil filters. So things have been modified. There used to be an oil filter down there originally that kind of stood up, and it's been changed with those hosing and mounted up there, so it's pretty easy to change the oil filter. Fuel filters can be a bit more tricky. Behind that black oil filter down in there, there's a fuel filter, And it's got a bowl on the bottom so you can kind of see if there's any contaminants coming in there, like a water separator. And then there's also 2 filters, secondary filters on the engine. Supposedly they can be kind of a pain to change because there's little gaskets and things like that. So I don't know, I might upgrade that. You can upgrade that and get a system where it's just a spin-off filter. Very easy to do then. And you can see the cooling. This was the original expansion tank on it. And then they added this secondary expansion tank as an add-on from the original. And it was kind of on a flimsy mounting plate. So when we had a mechanical inspection before we bought the boat, we had a marine mechanic, qualified marine mechanic, go through it and let us know the state of the engine. And he basically said it was good for cruising the summer, good for the season. A few minor things he told me needed to be fixed up and changed on it. There was a hose at the back, and also he wanted this a bit stronger mount on it, so I kind of got some bar and I mounted it with some steel bar, and that's where you see these silicone tops, just so I don't cut my leg on the bars and have a chance to round them or anything. And also I put some silicone, it's kind of like for baking, you know, you put it in your oven so it can handle heat, just so I don't mark up this aluminum as well. Anyway, that's just some of my initial mods there. You can see on these engines they're water cooled. So down here we got a C strainer, and over here, down here, we have what they call a sea cock. And so water is drawn in there from the ocean through that pipe, and then it goes through the strainer to get rid of any seaweed or stuff that might come in, and then it gets through heat exchangers and oil coolers and all sorts of things, and it gets helps cool the engine through raw cool seawater, which up here is pretty good because our sea stays at about 50-55 degrees most of the season. And you can see this is the exhaust manifold. So the actual seawater ends up joining the exhaust manifold, and the exhaust and seawater combine and go out a giant hose, and they head off through the boat and then out the back. So it's very important that seawater is going through there. So always check when we start the engine, make sure lots of water is coming out with the exhaust. And it also can be a leak point and stuff like that. But I've been learning all about marine engines in the last month or so, getting more and more confident with it. It also has cooling as far as freshwater cooling. So it's got coolant just like you know your car, and that's what this hoses are about. You fill it up here. On the front it's got a water pump here, and that runs off of a V-belt. Over here we got your alternator. That looks to me like the original old 55 amp alternator, so that may be on the list to upgrade as well. We're going to have to see how much power we use and how much we can get from solar and that sort of thing before I dig in and upgrade that. It may be sufficient if we have enough solar and we don't use that much power when we're out, because we're mostly going to be out in summer times. As far as the seawater, there's also down in there, there's a seawater pump as well, and it's the original, and I'd like to change that. There's actually an updated version of that. A lot of the parts come from a place called US Diesel Corp in Virginia in the US, and they were the ones that were involved in marinizing this old, it's basically a tractor engine, and they marinized it, so they knew all about it for many years. So they actually have a lot of the parts that are available, which was important to us when we were looking at engines. Can we get parts for it? You know, you don't want to buy an engine and then you can't get a part for it and you're dead in the water. So we kind of phoned them up. They actually answered the phone, and we might order a bunch of what we figure might be good things to carry on the boat. You know, like the different pumps and stuff like that. There's a fuel lift pump that we already have, a fuel lift pump, and that water pump I'd like to carry, and maybe get the alternator and the seawater pump. And there's also back there, there's an exhaust elbow, and there's a heat exchanger. It gets pretty complicated as far as hosing with these marine engines. But lots of room to work on it. And actually I do have a light back there. Just let me flip it on. there we go. So I got a engine light back there, which is kind of a cool thing that I got 12 volts back there, because one of the things I want to do is take one of my Halo View systems that we use rear view monitor and side view monitor for RV backup camera, and install cameras down here. I could put 3 cameras down here. It's a 4-camera system, and I'll be able to put them in strategic places so that when all these covers are on, I'll be able to look and see what's going on with the engine through the camera. And then we'll probably have a 4th that'll be the rear view out the boat. But it's nice that there's 12 volts and a breaker, so easy to turn on, and I can mount the 7-inch display up here in the lower helm. And back along the wall you can see in the bathroom plumbing there, that's the water system. So the water is drawn from tanks at the very back of the boat, and then it looks like kind of an old style PEX tubing. On each side behind this foil is a big stainless steel fuel tank. You can kind of see some valves there, and on this side there's another fuel tank, and then there's actually kind of like a manometer gauge there that tells you how much fuel you have. I believe they're both 125 gallon tanks, so you have about 250 gallon capacity. He just has an old jug there that he had for oil changes. Good idea, makes it easy. And he put down some of that stuff people use in their playrooms. Easy on the old knees. Down there you can see there's the engine bilge down there, and some of the wiring. See the wiring I was talking about, you got your alternator, but back there is your starter, just down in there where that telephone looking wire is, the solenoid in the starter. So that run comes along there and along there, and then it ends up down here at my DC bus bars. That's negative. Down here is positive. Bus bar. I actually went out and bought a little bit of protection. It just had kind of a plasticky cover on it, but I wanted a little more beefier cover. You know, if you drop stuff across that, you're going to have a dead short. So anyway, in there we have, you know, that's going to the switch, alternator, inverter, starter, all coming into a bus bar there. So it's nice that everything is right there, so it'll be easy to upgrade and work on. And then this, they have a, I think it's an automatically controlled relay. What it is when you're charging your house bank, when it reaches a certain voltage, it'll come and start charging your starter batteries. So right in there on these covers is 2 AGM starter batteries, and they go back over here to this bus bar, but they also, one line goes to this, which is for the bow thruster. So you got an on-off switch there for the bow thruster, and it also has a readout for voltage. Up here is a little baby controller. Look at that cute little solar controller, 15 amps. So there's 2 100-watt panels on this boat, and that's fine for that, 15 amps. They only put out about 5 or 6 amps each, but I'll be upgrading the solar, adding more solar and a different controller as well. Over here is the water heater. Not exactly sure. It looks maybe 6 gallons or so. And you can see there's where the tubing comes in and out. But on the back side, you can see there's some metal tubing, and that is coolant from the motor, the engine. When it's running, it runs through there, and it actually takes spare heat from the engine and heats water, which is really cool. So after about a half hour of runtime, you basically have nice hot water to deal with. So you can wash dishes and stuff, and when you arrive at your next anchorage, you can do whatever you need to do, have your showers and stuff on water that's been heated by the engine, because there is no electric in this, non-electric. When you're on shore power, there's electric, but you're not going to really, you know, it takes a lot of juice to heat up water, so you normally wouldn't do that when you're off grid. You could do it if you had a lot of solar and a lot of sunshine, I guess. Down here, this bucket right now is just temporary, because this is, I find this relief valve has been weeping a bit, so I've just been putting it in a bucket and then moving it off into the bilge when it fills up. We'll just spin around here. There's the main bilge. There's some water in there right now, bilge pump. And then there's also a manual bilge pump in case you had a power problem with your bilge or problem with your bilges, you could still pump. There's the water pump. Now that little water pump's called Paramax 2.9. Is it ever super noisy? I guess because it's mounted right on this wood and everything is thick piping, no relief with like hoses in a loop or anything, and no accumulator tanks, so I'll probably upgrade that. It works fine, it's just pretty loud. Kind of cycles too when you have just a little bit of water running. And then here is the holding tank for your black. And like I say, in the toilet you can see there's a pipe coming out there. Lots of piping. Anyway, when it's going out of the tank, you can see there's arrows, so it can be pumped out through that from the deck. There's a port for them to hook their vacuum pump out stations, or there's the macerator, and then it can go out that pipe and out that seacock. And then that big pipe is when you pump out of the toilet, and it goes and pumps out into that. And there's some other hoses on top. We got a vent hose. It looks like a vent hose, but then we have a second vent system up here. Sorry about that. Yeah, up here, this is like a charcoal filter so that the black tank odors don't show up outside. But I don't really know what's going on because there's a pretty good size vent hose there, so I don't know. I'm going to have to explore into that. Then we got some wiring for the tank monitoring system. Anyway, that's the belly of the beast with the engine and a lot of the plumbing systems, etc. And I'm sure you'll see more and more as I do more and more projects down there, but I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of the systems in the bottom of the boat. So I didn't get around the back of the engine to show you the transmission, but there's a transmission in there called a Paragon, and it has its own transmission fluid to change, and also it has a kind of its own cooler on the back there. But I'll show you an interesting thing I didn't know about till I got into boats. But back here, that thing down there that looks kind of green, and there's a shaft on, they call that a stuffing box. And in there, there's kind of like, it's like waxy shoelace that's been wrapped around and around and around to act as a seal. So the shaft spins there, and it's normal for some drips to come out of water. It's always constantly kind of leaking out a little bit of water, but not too much. There's some bolts to adjust it, but this is the access port to have a look at that. And also, it's under the stairs here, so I kind of keep that clear because when we're running, sometimes I'll pop that open and kind of see what's going on there. You don't want too much water leaking through that, or it may need to be repacked, they call it, or those bolts may need to be adjusted. Anyway, that's kind of a new thing to me. There also is what they call a dripless shaft seal. I'm not sure if I'll go with that or not. This seems to be been working. The previous owner said it's been fine, and it's just been repacked. As far as lighting goes, the fixtures are really nice in this boat. That's glass, either stainless or nickel coated metal, no plastic involved. Nice switches. But they do have the old school LEDs. I guess at some point they were upgraded. You can see they're like very large LED bulbs compared to nowadays, and they're not nearly as bright. I bet they cost a fortune to update back then when LEDs were first coming out. So yeah, I'll probably at some point maybe update those because they kind of flicker a little bit and they're not quite as bright as I'd like. And it's the same thing here. They have sort of a similar round LED fixture in there, bulb. But anyway, that's on the upgrade list, but not anything I have to do right away. And finally, we'll finish off at the back of the boat. Open up the Lazarette here, it's called. It's like a trap door. Underneath, you'll see the steering. of the boat and a couple of water containers. There's a stack of 3 on this side that has 60-gallon capacity for water, and I guess they used 320 gallons. Maybe it was hard to get a full 60-gallon in there, because I noticed on this side they replaced the old stainless steel one that was in there before, because on the other side we've got a stainless steel. But you can see there's valves on each side, and there's also a washdown valve there. There's the other side that shows stainless steel tank. I bet those were maybe the original or been updated at one time, but it's also 60 gallons. So 120 gallons of fresh water, that's pretty good. And see some of the wiring down there is for kind of grounding and zincs and stuff. You see it all ties at the back, just corrosion prevention. On boats they tie a lot of the stuff together and use zincs. And then on the back we got our high-field dinghy, and it's got a 6 horsepower Yamaha 4-stroke motor on it. Anyway, that's it for now. Kind of an overview of the nuts and bolts of our new CHB trawler, Vestri. I'm sure you'll see more and more as I start doing some of those repair and mods and upgrade projects that I've planned. Till next time, Ray from Love You RV and Boat. Cheers, everyone.